So we're going to go ahead and get started. There might be some more beeping that you hear as more people jump on the phone, but thanks for everyone for joining. And for those of you who have attended past trainings, this is going to be a little bit more in depth as far as some of the things we'll be talking about and the functionality that's available in IMAP. But if you do have questions as we go through, this is going to be a long training. It's going to be scheduled for 2 hours. We'll see if we can finish up a little bit early. But if you have questions, I'll try to incorporate some break time so you can ask any questions that you might have. But we'll go ahead and get started. Okay. This slide might look a little bit familiar to some of you who have attended past trainings, but I like to just give a quick overview for what iMapInvasives is, so we can kind of identify that and then move forward. So iMapInvasives is available online, and it's GIS-based and utilized for data management purposes. And so, of course, the name infers that it's used for documenting invasive species and where they're being found at. And just understanding those locations all across Pennsylvania, since we are based here in Pennsylvania, but other states as well, since we are part of a larger network, and so there is other states and currently one Canadian province that is participating as well. So you can use the database to see data being captured in those other places as well. But what we're going to talk about a lot today is how it is able to be utilized for documenting where people are controlling and doing eradication efforts. And of course, that's very important whenever you're talking about invasive species. In addition to using it for that purpose, it also can be used for prioritization, to be able to better understand what certain species are being found at, so you can then prioritize future survey and treatment efforts. So really kind of doing that analysis ahead of time to better prepare yourself. And then, of course, since it is basically a clearinghouse of information, IMAP is used to share that distribution data out with other people. So that includes both the point locations of where species are being found, as well as the specific efforts that people are doing all over Pennsylvania. So these two pictures, just as kind of a preface before we go into the details, is showing pulling purple loosestrife. And this is an effort. This would be considered a treatment effort. They're actually going out and doing removal. This will be captured in IMAP as a treatment record, and we'll go and you'll see exactly what I mean as we keep going through. So again, this is an effort that could be documented in IMAP. Would know specifically where the purple loosestrife is at. You would know the area that's being treated. You would know the date. You would know the organization. All of that. That's all information that can be captured. Okay, this slide goes a little bit more into detail about the network. So as I said before, it's not just Pennsylvania, but there are other states, and currently Saskatchewan up in Canada is also participating. So right now, the U.S. states include Arizona, Florida, New York, Oregon, Vermont, West Virginia, and of course here us in Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, we started in 2013, so we're almost 5 years old at this point. Just some logistics to remember when you are using iMap. Since it is online-based, you want to make sure that, if possible, you can use one of the 3 browsers listed here, either Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, or Safari if you're using a Mac computer. The reason being is if you're using Internet Explorer, IMAP doesn't play well with that particular browser. We've just seen over time that there are some quirks and things that just don't work the way that they're supposed to. So we encourage folks to use these other browsers instead. If you don't have access to those other browsers and you have to use Internet Explorer, make sure that you have the most up-to-date version. So right now that's going to be Internet Explorer 11 because it will work and it's going to work the best if you have that most recent version. But then if you can use your Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, or Safari. Okay, so we're going to talk about just some like a snapshot of the database and the overall structure. So how do things work? What data types are you going to use for certain purposes? And specifically if you're out doing management. So this is a screen that you will see when you log in to iMap for the first time. And again, after today's training, your user level is going to bump up. So what you might be used to seeing now is going to increase because there's going to be additional options that will appear, and that's based on you attending today's training and getting a better understanding of how the database operates. Starting from the left and going to the right, see a box called Enter Data, and this is where you're going to enter your findings for both observations, and then you look down, you'll see a list where it says Observation, Survey, Treatment, and Infestation Management. These are all different data types, so that's where you're going to click if you want to enter one of these new records for that particular information. Over to the right, you'll see a section called View the Map, and that's where you would go to actually visualize where species are being found with point locations, and also for the management efforts, which are going to be categorized as polygon data. The table section is going to show you basically the exact same information that you would see in the map. It's just going to see differently. It's going to be in a list format, essentially. So sometimes it's easier to view data on the map, depending on how you want to look at it. Sometimes it's easier to look at it on the table if you want to get an exact number of records. And then on the far right, you'll see there's a section for querying and reports. And this is where you can go to do a lot of customization and analysis. So if you're only looking for data for a certain species or a certain area, or if you want to combine some of those things and make a really custom type of filter for data, that's where you're going to go and do that. You'll see also a list of specific reports that you can run, again, depending on the kind of information that you're looking for. So options are all there. You just have to know that they're there. So I would encourage you guys, after today's training, to go in and just kind of play with some of those reports and see the information that is available to you. You'll notice up in the top right corner is information. It's kind of small on the screen, but right underneath where it says Amy, since I'm logged in under myself, you'll see it says user level 7. And so that user level is indicating the amount of information and functionality that you have access to. And I will go over later in the training what those different user levels mean and what data functionality you have access to. But for level 7, after today's training, everyone will be at a level 7 at least. So it will give you access to everything that we're talking about today. So this is a snapshot of the database. If you would take the first screenshot that we were just looking at and just scroll down the page a little bit further. So you'll see there on the top left is a section where you can go in and edit your profile. And this is where you can keep your contact information up to date. And that's especially helpful for me. So if I need to get in touch with you, or if I have a question or whatever, that's the place that I'm going to go and look for that information. So that's very helpful. If you want to go in periodically and change your password, just with everything going on nowadays, it's always important to make sure that your account for various things is staying secure. So that's where you would go in and change your password if you needed to do that. Manage My Alerts section is for email alerts. So if you wanted to set those up, basically to stay more aware of findings that are being reported to iMap, that's where you can go and do that. And again, we will be discussing email alerts more in detail as we keep going through the training. And down in the lower center and lower right section, area for downloading data. And this is where you can go in and get access to data appropriate to your user level. And again, we'll be going into detail about that. But keep in mind that you can download information both in an Excel file, or if you have access to GIS, you can also download into a geodatabase. So it's your preference, however you want to get the information. But keep in mind that you are not able to download all of the data in the database. That is set up on purpose. So you'll be able to always download data that either you entered or you are the observer for. And then there might be a few other things that you have access to depending on your user level, but you will never be able to access everything. If you did want to access more data than what your user level allows you to, you just have to contact me and we can go through that process. Okay, again, I just want to kind of go through the database structure and how taking what you're doing out in the field, how that relates to the database. So if you see an invasive species and you want to report it, you're going to plot its location as an observation point in the database. You want to record how large of a patch or a population of a species is, you're going to create an assessment record. And you want to do a search of a specific area, or you want to record absence or negative data. So if you go out and you look for something and it wasn't there, that's what we're going to consider absence data. You add a survey record. If you treated an infested area, this would be a trait record. And lastly, if you wanted to track all management efforts that were related for a particular species in a certain area, this is going to be what we are using to catalog. It's called an infestation management record. So altogether, there's 5 data types. We will be going in detail about each one, but that's kind of just a basic overview. Okay, so just wanted to talk a little bit about the specifics of the IMAP program here in Pennsylvania. I'd like to show this slide because I think it helps to see the faces of the people who are actually doing the work behind this program. It's not just a faceless, who's doing this work basically. But so it's the 3 of us. It's myself, Kirsten Carlson, and also Mary Walsh. We're all part of the Pennsylvania Natural Heritage Program, which is part of the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy. I'm the coordinator, so I do a lot of these trainings, outreach. I'm the person that answers questions and responds to emails. So sort of the face of the program, kind of the main person that will be in communication with you. Kirsten and Mary kind of do stuff on the back end, but very important work. Kirsten does a lot of work with bulk uploads, so when we get information is rich, maybe like hundreds of records, she will help to do bulk loading for that. It also helps when we do updates to the database and reference layers that we have that need to be updated. She will do work related to that. And Mary is very much involved in our grant process. So since we are a nonprofit, we rely on grant funding to keep us going. And so she does a lot of the reports that are needed for that, and it's not an easy process, and she makes it look very easy. So together, the 3 of us are the ones that are really running the program here in Pennsylvania. So as I mentioned before, here we're serving as a statewide invasive species council repository, but just keep in mind that this is not an official database, so it's not like there's a rule or regulation that everybody in Pennsylvania has to be using this. It's just an option that's available to track this type of information. We're hoping that maybe someday that will change and we are more prominent as far as at a statewide level. But for now, we are just being just an option that people can choose to utilize. As I mentioned through the database snapshots we just went through, there's multiple tools that are offered, again, all being utilized for documenting that distribution data and the management information. And those survey types specifically that we'll talk about today are the assessment survey, the treatment, and the infestation management. Okay, so again, it's the Pennsylvania program here provides a single system where multiple organizations can gather and share that information, and that's very unique in our state. There's a lot of places where data is being tracked internally and it cannot be shared outside of that system, or there's just kind of, someone here and someone there gathering data, but it's not being shared or it's not being able to be distributed. And so that's what this program is really all about, is kind of gathering all that information together in one place so that it can be utilized by everybody. So we really feel that what we're doing is important and think that we have a high impact on what's going on as far as the natural resources here in Pennsylvania because, as we know, invasive species have big impact and they can be very threatening to valuable ecosystems that will support threatened and endangered species. And so collecting data on these invasives is kind of the first step to better understanding what we need to do to protect these special places. And here at the Natural Heritage Program, we call those special places natural heritage areas. and we work very hard to try to analyze and understand what we need to do to better protect the species that are living there. Here, I have some photos of some species that have been reported iMapInvasives in the past, and these would be species among many others that will essentially raise red flags for us to say this is a species that we really want to make sure we get a good handle on because it could have a big impact on certain species that are native to this region. So we have water lettuce, New Zealand mud snail, hydrilla, and European frogbit that are pictured here. But just keep in mind there is a slew of species that could go on that list, and these are just a few of them so that you are aware. So when we gather that information from multiple sources and kind of put it all into one place, and sources are coming from different places, so we get information from nonprofit organizations, cooperative weed management areas, which we have a few of those here in Pennsylvania, state agencies, school groups, consultants, and citizen scientists, all that information because it's so different. It's coming from these different data sources. When you put all that together into one place, we look at that as being a well-rounded and a strong database because it's not coming all from a state agency or it's not coming all from a school group. It's coming from all these different places. So we really think that having that professional and citizen scientist perspective as far as where the data is coming from is one of the reasons why IMAP is such a good and strong database. So just to kind of give you some quick stats on some of the work we've done so far. To date, 97 organizations have contributed data to iMapInvasives, and thanks to our work study student who's here in the room with us, Aspen, we have reached over 10,000 observation records currently in the database, which is really exciting. That accounts for 258 track species, so that's a lot. We've conducted over 47 trainings, so a training just like this. It accounts for over 400 people who have been trained. And currently, we have received reports for 13 species that are considered either early detection or high priority, the ones that we really want to know about because those are ones that we want to make sure we get out and do something about quickly in order to minimize their impact. And when we receive reports for those species, that's something that we will reach out to state agencies and other appropriate groups and make sure that they are aware of these findings as soon as possible. Because very often, if that data isn't put in a place where it can be shared, it can go sometimes for years before the information is distributed and someone's like, well, why didn't I know about this before? And it's like, well, it wasn't it wasn't communicated or people didn't realize it should be communicated about. Here we kind of keep tabs on those species, and if we do receive a report, it's something that we know to be in touch with the appropriate agency right away. Okay, any questions about anything we've talked about so far? Okay, so we'll keep moving. So I just want to give a brief overview about how to enter observation data, but it's just going to be really quick because that's not going to be the main focus for today, but I did want to mention it. So we talked a little bit about these already, but an observation is a report of an invasive species where it's being found at a specified location and on a certain date. Multiple observations can be made for the same population of species, so maybe you have a whole acre of land and there's a lot of, in this picture, giant hogweed. Hopefully that isn't the case because it's a noxious weed, but maybe you have a lot of plants comprising a large population and you wanted to make multiple observations to indicate that size. You can do that, or you can just enter one observation. Either way is fine. It's kind of up to you what you want to do. You can choose to enter observations manually into your desktop computer, or you can also use our mobile app, which we have that available. I just recently did a training for that, so if you missed that and you want to learn more about how to use the mobile app, that is available and recorded on our website. We also do bulk uploading, so when we get a lot of records, we will sometimes just do that here in-house, and we will do that kind of on the back end, where we will upload large data sets. And whenever you're entering observation data, we add the following information. So if you have photographs, very important. We want who the observer was and their organization that they're affiliated with. If it's part of a project, which I've talked about that before, it's basically a way that you can combine data together so that you can query for it and find it easily later on if you wanted to do any type of data analysis. First, the species that you found, the date you found it on, and the location where it was found at. Some more information, I just wanted to mention this, want to use the mobile app if you aren't familiar with that. There's also more information found on the iMapInvasives.org website, specifically just for mobile tools. There's a user manual there and some screenshots that kind of help to walk you through the process if you wanted to learn more about that. When it comes to observation data, I'd like to mention about cultivated species. This is really important to keep in mind. So when you're out and you're finding a certain species, in these pictures here, the example is for calorie pears, not report where you're finding species that were planted on purpose, aka a cultivated species. So if it's in a yard, if it's in one's garden or another type of landscape area, we don't want to have these reports for these species in iMap. And the reason this is because the purpose of iMap is to better understand where species are that need to ultimately be treated, to be removed. That's basically what we're going for. So if we would go in and chop down these calorie pears in this parking lot, I'm pretty sure that there would be some repercussions from that. So we go down that route. Although it is important to mention that when species like this are planted on purpose, they often can escape into natural areas, which then leads to the issues that we see. So in the picture down here in the bottom, you can see, this natural setting is being invaded by calorie pears, probably because they're planted nearby in someone's yard. So this is something that, even though at a state level we are still fighting this battle as far as trying to stop the sale of invasive species, this is something that I always try to tell people is when you're out yourself and maybe you're purchasing something at your local nursery or Lowe's or Home Depot, know what you're buying ahead of time and don't purchase one of these. Don't purchase calorie pears. Don't purchase many other things that unfortunately are still being sold. Always think about trying to purchase native things instead, because that will essentially eliminate the problems that we're seeing with these escapees of these invasives. So please do not report cultivated species. If you wanted to learn more about how to enter observation data, we have a training video available that's on our website, and you can check that out at any time that you'd like. It's about 15 minutes long, and it kind of just walks you through the process of how that works. So that is available on our website. I'd like to mention about how our data is quality checked, which is something we do take very seriously. We want to make sure that all the data that's actually going into the database is what we are saying that it is. And so what we do is if data is coming from a trusted source like a state agency or an expert that we are partnering with, that goes in automatically and it will be confirmed right away. If it's coming from someone that we aren't familiar with or we don't know their identification skills, that's where the photos come into play. And it's very important to make sure that you're setting photo that we can distinguish very easily the special characteristics of whatever it is that you're looking at, because we're going to rely on that to then make an identification from it. So, for example, we've had some reports come in earlier this year for a New Zealand mud snail, and those were reviewed by a gastropod expert in South Carolina, Dr. Robert Dillon. We have folks here at the conference that we're really lucky to have who are experts in plant identification, and so whenever we have plant species that we need to have a second look at, we'll have our botanists take a look and confirm, or if we have questions to follow up with the user. And so if we have any data that's coming from the Department of Environmental Protection here in Pennsylvania, all of their records are first confirmed by the Morris Arboretum in Philadelphia. So that's kind of their QC process that then we just automatically will put that in as good trusted data. So that's kind of how our QC process works with iMap. Okay, so email alerts. I want to go more into detail about how this works and why you might be interested in setting up some email alerts that we offer. The main purpose of email alerts is to stay informed of recent findings that are being reported to the database by other users. So information can be used to prioritize your organization's survey and treatment efforts, again, based on the information that you would specifically ask to be notified about. And ultimately, we're hoping this information from email alerts can be used to help you take action and prevent the spread of species that might be rare in the state, or ones that are recently discovered, or even ones that are common and just need to go out and be treated. And they might be in your area that you're working in. We do have 3 alert types that are available, and I'm going to go through each one so that you better understand what they are and what they offer. So the first alert type is called a continual alert, and this is going to put a focus on any one species or a group of species that you have a particular interest in. So what you want to do is you want to choose an area of interest. So you want to say, I'm only concerned about this particular species in this county, because where I live. Or maybe you're part of a cooperative weed management area, CWMA, and you want to be notified of species that are found inside that cooperative weed management area. Maybe you work specifically or are interested in a certain water body, so you might choose that. Or maybe you just want to know if a species is found anywhere in Pennsylvania. So you want to choose a geography that suits your interests. And then for a continual alert, the observations that will trigger this one are going to be more recent. So anything that's found 1 year ago or sooner. This is the most basic type of alert that we offer, and I would say if someone's going to set up an email alert, it's probably going to be this kind. So if you're interested in email alerts, I would definitely keep your focus on this one. So an example of a continual alert is something like this. You could say, alert every time mile a minute is found in the town of Murraysville in Pennsylvania. Maybe that's where you live. You want to keep track of when it's being found in around the area that you are. Here's examples of what a continual alert could look like. You could say, alert me anytime that calorie pear is reported in the Bennett Branch Forest. Maybe this is an area that you work in specifically, and you want to know whenever that species is found there. Say, alert me anytime bog bulrush is reported in Lancaster County. Maybe you have an interest just in what's happening at that county level. You also say, alert me anytime round goby is reported anywhere in Pennsylvania. Maybe you're more concerned about a certain species and anytime it's found within the state. These are all examples of what you could do as far as setting up a continual alert. The alert type is called an early detection alert, and this is going to put a focus on species that are rare or are not yet found in Pennsylvania. So again, choose that geography that's of the most interest to you, either a county, CMA, a water body, all of Pennsylvania. This is going to trigger on alerts that are found more recently, so either 1 year ago or sooner. And just so you know, iMapInvasives considers a species to be an early detection species if there are 3 or fewer observations for that species in a specified geography. What that means, here's an example. Say you have only 2 reports for wavy leaf basket grass that's reported in York County. Essentially, it makes wavy leaf basket grass in York County an early detection species because we only have 2 reports for it. So as soon as you hit over 3, it's not going to be an early detection species anymore, just based on how iMapInvasives identifies that species. So this alert type is really useful as far as raising a red flag when new or rare species is being found. So if you're out doing early detection work, this is an alert that you might want to keep in mind. So again, using that wavy leaf basket grass example, this is actually a species that was found for the first time in Pennsylvania last year. So this is a really appropriate alert to set up. So you could say, alert me if wavy leaf is found anywhere in Pennsylvania. Which, if it is, this is one that we want to know about because right now it's only been found in 2 state parks in York County. So if it's found anywhere else in Pennsylvania, we really want to know about it. So this alert would trigger and would tell you if any more reports came in. Some other examples of an early detection alert. So this is a photo of diffuse knapweed. Right now, it's not known to be in Pennsylvania. So if you set up an alert specifically for this species, they said, and anywhere in Pennsylvania, the first report would trigger this early detection alert. Okay, kudzu bug, this is another species that we don't have in Pennsylvania yet, as far as we know. And the first report for it would trigger it had a specific early detection alert set up for this species. On-water starboard, this one is found in Pennsylvania, but it's pretty rare right now. So any additional reports would trigger this early detection alert. If there was maybe one report so far, 2 more would continue to trigger this particular alert type. Okay, so that's how that one works. You're looking really at those species that are rare or they're not yet found in Pennsylvania. So alert type is called new to geography. And this one is a little bit different as far as it puts a focus on a grouping of species. So it's not going to look necessarily at the individual species like the other 2 alerts did. This is going to be more in a group. So this is going to also put focus on species that are found in an area that they've never been found in before. So I'm going to go a little bit more into detail about what that means. It kind of sounds a little bit like an early detection alert, but it is a little bit different. So again, I'm going to choose that area of interest like you did with the other 2 alerts. This one is going to trigger on alerts that could be actually really old. So it's going to trigger on ones that it could be reported up to 2 years ago. So this one is really useful. You want to know about species that are found in a particular place, and you want to know if something has been reported for the first time. So this one is kind of different in that it could be even for a common species, and it just hasn't been reported there before. So that's kind of why it's a little bit different from the early detection alert. Here's an example. You could say, alert me when any new terrestrial plant is reported in Bear Run Nature Reserve, which is located in Fayette County. So maybe you're a land manager there, and you basically know all the species that have already been reported, but if you set up this new to geography alert, this would potentially notify you if something new came around that you want to consider to manage. See other examples. You could alert me when any new plant species is reported in Warren County. If you live in Warren, that might be appropriate to do. You alert me when any new aquatic animal is reported in the Pymatuning Reservoir. So if you're looking at doing work in a water body, again, this might be important for you. You could say something like, alert me when any new terrestrial plant species is reported in Bucktail State Park. So if you're working specifically in a state park or something like that, again, this might be an important way to be notified when something new comes along. Are there any questions about the email alerts or anything else we've talked about so far?
Nope.
All right, so let's kind of dig into the main part of today's training, learning about all of these advanced data records, okay? These are going to all be polygon records, and they're going to be complements to your observation data to say what is actually happening with this observation data. Is it being treated? Is it part of a survey? This is how we're going to document all that information. So we're going to start by talking about the assessment information a little bit more in depth. So the assessment is going to be useful to document efforts where you want to better understand the impacts that are being caused by the invasive species at a particular location. So reasons for why you might want to capture assessment data are some of the following. So maybe you want to better understand what the threats are to a certain area. They know the intensity of infestation. Is it kind of just there in a small quantity? Is it really dense and thick? There's a way you can document that. You know about the damage being done to the location. Maybe the soil's being eroded. Maybe all the native species are gone because of the invasives that are there. This is another way to capture that information. You can go in and enter in assessment data if you want to do, if you work as far as pre or post treatment, and you want to capture if that treatment was successful. Here's an example. If you want to look at the photo here, purple loosestrife, where it's being documented as an assessment record, and it's used to basically record the population size, so how big of an area are we talking about as far as how much pollution is in this area, the damage that's being caused to the surrounding landscape. Of course, this is going to have a lot of impacts, and so we want to talk about what those impacts are that we're seeing, and then any plans for future action. As far as, okay, I want to go out and do treatment for this area next year, anything like that. That's all information that we can capture in an assessment record. Kind of a hypothetical example to run through as far as how you would document this information and the things that you want to think about capturing. So the site disturbance is going to ask you, is it being disturbed by natural means? Is it being disturbed by humans? A combination of the two. So here in this scenario, we're saying it's being choked out by invasive species, so natural disturbance, and we're saying Phragmites is the cause of that. Damage that's being caused is essentially the native species aren't able to grow there anymore because there is so much of this Phragmites that's there. So that's a big problem. So about the area, we would maybe want to mention that this is a wetland area. And in this scenario, we're saying that there's some rare species that are present. We know this. We want to make sure that we document that because that's very important to mention. Also, as far as follow-up goes, SED would want to go out and do treatment at a later date in order to then bring that native seed bank, because at one point it was there, now it's being choked out by all these Phragmites. Photos are really important, and you can add, I believe, up to 3 or 5 photos in your assessment record, again, to kind of document what you're seeing at that area. So for a survey, why I want to create a survey? So this is essentially a way that you can capture information for a planned search of an area to the presence or, as we mentioned before, the absence of a specific invasive species. So here's why we would want to do this. So you can use a survey to capture data then collected at like a BioBlitz, where you had a particular area that was searched and you want to put all that information together into a survey. You might have someone that's going out and conducting academic research on the distribution of a single species. So again, that would be a reason why you might want to create a survey. You might be part of a community group that's in charge of maintaining a certain park, and the boundaries of that park is about as far as you go. You might want to create a survey based on the boundaries of the park that you are in charge of managing. You'll also be part of a land stewardship if you're part of a land trust and you want to go out and accurately document the activities that you're doing as far as the land stewardship. Again, recording negative or absence data is also something that a lot of people are interested in doing. This is the only way right now in IMAP that you can actually document if you look for something and you didn't find it. It's going to be through that survey record. Here's another hypothetical example of how you might use a survey. The goal for this one is to go out and survey for the presence or the absence of Didymo in French Creek. Did you find it? So in this scenario, we're going to say that we looked for it and we actually didn't find any Didymo. So this would be classified as absence data. But you can still go in, create that survey, outline the area that you searched, and say, as far as I can see, there is no Didymo here. So you want to outline the portion of French Creek that you looked at, and any details as far as how you performed your survey. So for this one, you probably were doing an underwater survey, or you might have also been doing a visual survey from along the shoreline or doing snorkeling. So these are all things that you would want to include documenting your survey record for this type of effort. Data. It's going to be used, of course, whenever you're going out and actually doing anything related to manage, control, or eradicate a species. The various types of treatment that you might be doing could be any of these. So if you're out and you're spraying something and using chemicals, species that works well for hand pooling. Also, people are utilizing goats for grazing purposes to manage invasive species, so that's a method. Also, burning, prescribed burning is a method that some people are using. Barriers, So maybe like cardboard or something else to the top of the species to prevent the sunlight from getting to it. Also, people are using bioagents. So these are insects that are used specifically to try to suppress certain invasive species. And then also, if you're trying to manage something like feral swine, maybe organized hunt is the way that you're conducting that treatment effort. Another hypothetical example. This is actually, this company, Allegheny Goatscape, is owned by someone who works here at the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy. So I'm kind of advertising for him. So in this scenario, we're saying that we have to suppress a 2-acre population of Japanese knotweed on land that's being owned by a private conservancy. So the method we want to use is goats. We're going to rent them, and they're going to go out and eat all this Japanese knotweed. So the details that are associated with this effort would be that, so say you went out and you had 10 goats that were part of this effort and were out grazing for a 2-week period. You want to mention that because you're using the goats, that there are no toxic plants that are present on the site that might hurt the goats, but there's an area that's known nearby to host rare species. So whenever we're going to have the goats out grazing, we want to have this area protected to make sure that that stays safe. So because we're saying it's on land owned by a private conservancy, we would want to mention that permission is going to be needed as far as doing that work. And then in this scenario, we're saying that there is a private landowner nearby where Japanese knotweed is also found on a portion of their property as well. And so we would need permission from them in order to include that in with this effort. So just another hypothetical example of this type of effort being recorded as a treatment record in iMap. Okay, so the infestation management, remember this is the one where we're going to be compiling all the management efforts together for a species at a certain location. So you can think of it kind of as a one-stop shop of being able to do analysis on everything that's been happening in a certain area for a certain species. Reasons why you might want to create an infestation management record. You are part of a land stewardship department where you maintain several properties and you want to know when the management process each of those properties is at as far as what species you are managing on them. Give you that perspective in order to understand the latest effort that might happen or additional observations that might have been found in that area maybe you weren't aware of, and maybe someone else had actually entered that data, and then that fell within your infestation management record. Another scenario would be something like this, where you have a reservoir that was surveyed for hydrilla at various sections of that water body over many years. Each section, when it was surveyed, was recorded as an individual survey record. So by grouping all of those survey records together, you can really see how many sections were done over those years, how many areas were reviewed to see if hydrilla was there. And you can also get a timeline how long hydrilla was there based on observation data and the survey dates. So this is really for analysis purposes to get a better understanding of what's actually happening on the ground and the efforts that are being done by you and other people that maybe you aren't even working with, but are also in these areas. Here's another example of an infestation management record that's happening in-house here at the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy. We manage the land that is in the area where Lake Pleasant is at, and that's up in Erie County. And so these are efforts that are being cataloged as part of the infestation management record to better understand where in the process we are with treating milfoil at this location. So by creating this type of record, here's all the stuff that I'm able to figure out. So I can know that the first documented recording of Eurasian water milfoil in Lake Pleasant, according to what we have in iMap, was on August 3rd, 2007. So maybe this is information that you might want to tell other people about. This is how long we've known milfoil to be at this location for. Even go a step farther, and by looking at the observation data, you can know who made that observation. So I can know that this was found by one of our employees here at the Conservancy, And it's actually part of a special project, which was the Pennsylvania Glacial Lakes Flora Project. Again, that might be important information to know about. So again, using that timeline of information, and also know that the most recent observation of milfoil was just a few years ago in 2014. So there we've already established a timeline of 2007 being the first observation, and now at least going into 2014. So that might be a reason to go out again in 2017 and still see if it's there based on the information that we have here so far. And that most recent observation we know was made by people either here, well actually it was a combined effort from folks at the Conservancy and also Pennsylvania Sea Grant. So in addition to understanding the observations and when they were found the first, the most recent, we can also know what's happening as far as management. So I can know, based on the data that we've documented, that we just did chemical treatment for milfoil last spring in 2016. And so our total of 3 treatment efforts were conducted at this site. So again, that's a kind of a better example that you can sort of use to wrap your head around how this particular data type is used, because you can really get a better understanding of what's happening, who's doing the work, and who's involved. Okay, so again, specific region, specific species, and a better understanding of what's happening over time. Any questions about any of those data types or specifically about the infestation management record? I know that one can be a little confusing sometimes. So is there any questions?
No.
That's good. All right. So a little bit more now that we've gone over these different record types. I mentioned how you can actually go in and query for this information, because sharing data is one thing, but actually being able to use it for various purposes is really the meat and bones as far as using this information for what you're out doing in the field. So we're going to talk about how you can query for that information. So here's an example. So say you just finished entering an assessment record and you want to go back into IMAP and retrieve it. How do you do that? So this step is going to be, well, there's actually 3 you can do it. So you can go in and find the observation record that it's affiliated with. You go in and use the map to find it, or you go in and do a custom data query. I'm going to go through all 3 of those, and I'll show you how to do it. So this option was, again, using that affiliated observation record to find where that where that assessment record is at in the database. Log out. If you log in and are looking at the main navigation page, you want to click on the View Table. And there, you would want to type in the observation's ID number in order to bring it up in the table. We can see that it's showing up in the table, and you click on that record, and it will open up. Again, this is that observation record that the assessment is affiliated with. So once you open up that record and scroll down to the rated records section, you'll see that there is an ID number there for that assessment record. So you click on that, and by clicking on that, you will be transported right to that assessment record that's being affiliated with that observation. Because in order to have an assessment record, you first have to have that observation. So that's why they're kind of linked in that way. So that's one way that you can query for assessment data. You can also use the map to find where these assessments are being found at. Over on the legend on the left side of the page, if you scroll down to the species details section and click on the area where you see those yellow squares, they call for assessments, and you'll see that there's 3 different ones, one for animal assessments, insect assessments, and plant assessments. So you want to choose the one that's most appropriate for the one that you're trying to find. So in this scenario, we're going to click on animals. You'll sort of see that it's hard to see here, but there were some yellow little circles that showed up on the map, but they're really hard to see. So I'm going to change the background of the map so then actually see them a whole lot better. So here you can see that we can see that yellow, it really pops. The way I did that is I chose the base layer there also on the left side in the legend to a different map type. There's about, I think, 4 or maybe more than 4 that you can choose from. Okay, so I'm going to use one of these little yellow areas and holding the Shift key down while drawing a little box with your mouse, you can zoom in on the map and I get a closer look at that assessment. Okay, here I am zoomed in on that assessment record, and if you click on it right from the map, the box is going to appear. It's going to say Management Record Results, and this is going to be everything that you just clicked on in that area. So it looks like there was multiple records that showed up, and I'm going to be interested specifically in that middle record, okay, the one that's for the zebra mussel. And here I can click right on that little button, that ID button, and it will take me right to that assessment record. Okay, so again, you can get to it that way as well. Also query for assessment data by doing a custom data query. And the way you're going to do that is if you find the area on the main navigation page for View Table, if you look down farther in the list, you'll see what says Assessment, and there's those animal, insects, and plants categories that you can choose from. So again, I'm going to choose the animal section. It's going to open up a table for all of the animal assessments that we currently have, and there's a button on the right side that says Custom Data Query. Click on that button, and a window is going to show up that gives me a bunch of data filters that I can go through, try to find the assessment that is the one I'm looking for. Okay. So for this one, I know the observation ID number, kind of like I did with that first example of using the affiliated observation to find it. So enter that observation ID number. I'm going to choose, once you scroll down on the page, I'm going to choose to view that information in a table. You can also choose to view that information on the map, whichever you choose. So I'm choosing to look at it in a table, and based on the information I put into the custom data query, here it is. It's saying here is that affiliated observation record that's related to the assessment that I'm interested in looking at. So by clicking on that from the table, it will bring up your assessment record just like that. And a few ways you can get to the information. You kind of have to know the tools that are available in order to do that. So query for the survey, the treatment, and the infestation management records, it's very similar to what we just did for the assessment. The only thing that's different is that we only have 2 options right now. We can only either use the map or that custom data query. And the reason that is we can't use that affiliated observation option because it only works for assessments. Those assessments and observations are tied kind of one-to-one together. So the surveys and treatments and infestation management aren't directly tied to observations like the assessments are. So that's why we can only query on these other 2 ways. Okay, so that's kind of how you do data querying. I also want to talk really quickly about how you're going to be viewing data on the map as far as looking at distribution information on a statewide level and also at more of a local scale, just depending on how you want to look at the information. So if you're in iMap and you look at information specifically on the map, this is a screenshot that you will likely see. And if you're not familiar with what this means, it's really important to better understand the symbology and the numbers and everything. What does this all mean? So the numbers that you see inside of the circles and the squares on this screen are essentially representing the amount of observations that are found at a particular location. Okay? And the green circles, you'll see there's a lot of green circles in this picture, they are all representing observation data that is precise location. So that this information was found specifically at this spot. We had GPS coordinates, or we were really able to get close to that location. And this has also been QC'd by the administrator. So this is all information that's good that we're saying it's been reviewed, and it is the species that it's saying that it is. You'll see a few orange squares on the map. This is also observation data that's been QC'd by the administrator. The only thing that's different is that information is representing locations that are not precise. So it's essentially approximate to something else. So for example, it could be approximate to a county, it could be approximate to a water body or a municipality. Essentially, it's not at a precise location like green circles are representing like specific GPS coordinates. And the yellow circles that you see on the map are representing unconfirmed data. So it has not yet been reviewed or QC'd by the administrator yet. And so don't look at that information as factual, because there might be some issues with the species identification that we just haven't had a chance to review yet. So just know that that information is there, it's being reviewed, and when it does get reviewed, we essentially change it into a green circle or an orange square representing confirmed data. Okay. Also on the map, there's a lot of different ways that you can help yourself to look at the information. So you have the observation data or the polygon data on the map. Having these other layers available to you is really to help to better understand where these species are and to just kind of get a better understanding of what's going on. A variety of base layers. I kind of showed you that a little bit already, that you can change what the map looks like in the background. I also have a bunch of overlay layers that you can use to better understand where something is being found. So for example, you can turn on the county layer and see all the different counties. You can turn on the cooperative weed management area layer, and this will show you all the different CWMAs that we have in Pennsylvania. We have what's called HUC layers. These are hydrologic unit codes, essentially showing the size of different watersheds, both large and small. We also have a layer for major water bodies, the Natural Heritage Program's Natural Heritage Areas, and there's several others on here. There is a lot to choose from. Also, again, right from the map, you can choose to turn on or off all of the observation information, so the confirmed, the approximate, and the unconfirmed data. And then also everything we've just talked about as far as the advanced records, you can also turn on or off any assessment, survey, treatment, or infestation management data. This is all available to you on the map. So again, just kind of showing you what those reference layers look like that we just talked about. This is what the county layer would look like, so you can have a better understanding of what county some of these species are being found in. This is an example of what the HUC 6 layer looks like. Again, this is displaying the size of different watersheds. So 6 looks like this, and this is a HUC 8 layer, getting a little bit smaller. This is 12, so we're really zooming in on some of these really smaller areas with these watersheds. Right, this is the cooperative weed management area layer. So if you are a member or a coordinator of a cooperative weed management area, this is a layer that's going to be very important for you. So just so you know, in Pennsylvania, we have 5 total CWMAs, and 7 of them are currently active. And so you see up in Erie, that's the Lake Erie Watershed CWMA. The one that's just sort of southeast of the Allegheny National Forest, that is the Cinnamon Invasive Plant Management Area. You'll see kind of a lot of little dots south of Pittsburgh, and that is the Southern Laurel Highlands Plant and Pest Management Partnership. Those are 3 CWMAs that are actively managing invasive species right now. We do have 2 other areas that are inactive at this point, but we still are defining them within the layer. And so the Juniata is the large one that you'll see just under the word Pennsylvania on the map, kind of in the center part of the state. And then the very, very large one over on the right-hand side is the Delaware River Invasive Plant Partnership. So again, 2 are inactive at this point. I haven't checked in with the coordinator, so they may be becoming active again. I'm not sure. And And I do believe that there are 2 more CWMAs that are getting formed. They should actually be happening sometime in 2018. And that is the Genesee CWMA, which is going to be kind of up in the north central part of the state. And also there's an Allegheny Plateau CWMA. And that one, I believe, is going to be located in the northwest. So it's more to keep your eyes peeled for. Again, continuing on with the reference layers, this one is kind of important to mention. Just it's so detailed in nature is the streams layer. This is one that if you are zoomed out on the map where you're looking at the whole state, you'll be able to turn it on. And here, if you look closely in the map overlay layers section, that the word streams is grayed out. And this is because it's saying this is so detailed that I can't draw it when it's so far out. You need to zoom a little bit further in to actually use this layer. And once you get to the point that you can turn it on, once you're zoomed in far enough, that word streams will be dark, like a bold color. It won't be that light gray, and that will essentially be telling you that you can then turn this on. So that's what the streams layer looks like. So there's also some really cool features in iMap where you can look at sea level and watershed level data. And this is kind of cool as far as using the map to really highlight the counties that are being impacted by certain species. So I wanted to look at something for just the county level. That's what we're going to talk about here. So in order to do that, so for this example, I'm looking specifically at which counties are being impacted by water chestnut. So in order to do that, on the map, you'll locate the area called distribution. From there, you'll see there's different radio buttons that you can choose, either animal, insect, or plant. So because we're looking at water chestnut, I want to click on the plant radio button. And there, if you look down at the bottom of that section, you'll see a button that says county. So I'm going to click on county, and then the map overlay layer section that we've just been talking about, turn on your county layer. And this is what you would see if you logged into the database. The information would highlight and would indicate all the different counties where water chestnut is currently being found at. And it's kind of a nice way to look at the information because you can see very distinctly those counties where that is being found at. Just to keep in mind is the different colors of blue that you see in the map, some of the lighter colors and the darker blues. This is just representing the number of observations that have been reported for that species in that county. It's not actually representing the density of the population. It's just representing the amount of observations that we have received. So with that in mind, it's not really representing anything as far as importance to land stewardship and how dense the population is. That's not what it's saying. It's just saying this is here, basically. Okay. So in kind of the same thing, what we talked about just with the counties, this is for the watersheds. If you're a watershed specialist or you're someone that is really interested in the water aspect of managing invasive species, this would be a really important tool to use. So very similar with the example of zebra mussels for this one. So the distribution section on the map, I'm choose the animal radio button, and then at the bottom, instead of county, I'm going to click on watershed, and when I choose the species I'm interested in, again, that's going to be zebra mussel, and this would be the map that would then appear. You would see all the different watersheds that are being impacted by zebra mussel according to data that we've received so far in our database. Again, the different colors of blue, don't really worry about that. It's indicating the number of observations that we've received. Okay, so this is going to be an example that's going to talk about how you search for specific species and locations where it was found. And this is going to be an example we use for purple loosestrife. The map, up the top, that you'll see a search bar. So you can type in either the common name or the scientific name. So we say either purple loosestrife, or if you know the scientific name, Lithium salicaria, you can type in either one of those. right next to the search box is a little magnifying glass button. And if you click that magnifying glass button, the change, and it will bring up all the data that we have for purple loosestrife. And you'll notice that in addition to Pennsylvania, there's data that's showing in both New York and Virginia. And these are because these are also states participating in the iMapInvasives network. So their data is also going to show up. Now keep in mind that they're logged into the Pennsylvania specific version of iMap, that if you would click on any data in a state outside of Pennsylvania, it will only bring up kind of just a very short version of the data. You won't be able to click on the record and open up the full record from the Pennsylvania database. What you would have to do is log out, request a login account from that other state, and then log into their database in order to see the more specific details according to that record. But at least from this perspective, you can get an understanding of where these species are being found in areas that are surrounding Pennsylvania. So a nice way to look at the information. So to take that a little bit further, and you want to know the counties, the specific counties that are being impacted by purple loosestrife. So using what we talked about, that county distribution tool, now I can really see much easier all the different counties where it's been found at so far in Pennsylvania, according to the data that we have received. You can also turn on some of those reference layers that we talked about. So if I'm part of a cooperative weed management area, maybe it's really helpful to better understand that information by turning on that layer and zooming in a little bit closer to see specifically where they're being found. This is a view of the natural heritage areas layer. So this is indicating areas that are supporting rare, threatened, and endangered species in our state. So again, something to keep in mind if you are considering to do treatment, to keep in mind these areas that we want to protect because they are so special. The managed areas layer, so these are all of the areas like the Allegheny National Forest, you'll see is really dark green. That's a managed area. Other places where there's a lot of forest, so you'll see kind of based up in the northern part of the state, there's a lot of those managed areas. Against that county layer, getting a better understanding of where these species are being found within each of the counties can be very helpful. Okay. So just kind of going into how looking at data can be very helpful if you use some of these reference layers. So this is a view of data that we have so far for chestnut. And this is a good map. This is showing me, basically where they are. But it's not giving me all the information that I could have as far as better understanding where these populations are located. So again, using that distribution tool to identify the specific counties is really helpful. So now you can see the specific counties where it's been found at. And you zoom in, so say I'm interested in what's happening in the eastern part of the state, I can see more specifically the places in each of those counties where water chestnut has been found. Again, it's really given me a better understanding of those locations. If you were to click on any one of those green circles, you'd have that management record results box show up. From there, you can click on any one of those records and look at the details and everything that's associated with them. So that's kind of a neat way to look at the information that way. Any questions about anything we've talked about? This next part is always fun to talk about because Lasso tool is really neat. Okay. What is the Lasso tool? Well, I'm going to tell you. So this is kind of a newer tool that we just incorporated into iMap about a year or so ago. And essentially, it provides a faster and more effective way to understand data that's being shown on the map. Let me explain what I mean by that. So here's some reasons why you might want to use the Lasso tool. So say you're creating a management plan for an area being impacted by invasives. You need to know specifically which species already are being found in that area. you can use the Lasso tool to figure that out. You also want to know which species have been found in your local park or another recreational area. Again, the Lasso tool is going to be a quick way to grab all that data and get a quick look at it. Or you might be creating reports for species that are found in a particular area of interest. These are all reasons why the Lasso tool could potentially be handy. So how do you access the Lasso tool? Up in the kind of right part of the screen, you'll see a little polygon box. That is going to be your Lasso tool. That's what you're going to use when you do this type of searching, this data querying. So I'm going to give you an example so you kind of get a better understanding of how you're going to use this. So my example is I want to see all the invasive species findings that were reported at Flight 93, according to data that we have submitted to iMapInvasives. So what you do is, again, you're back on the main navigation page. You would say view the map. You would up the map, and now you would want to say, I want to look specifically at a certain area, so we're interested in Flight 93. So you could either type that in up at the top search box, or you could just kind of zoom around on the map until you get to where you want to be. So here I'm zoomed in at Flight 93. And here I want to turn on all the confirmed and approximate data that's been found at this location. So you're going to do that using the information over on the legend. So here I chose all the information, and here it is showing up on the map. So from here, all this information, that's a lot of different species that are being found. So how do I figure out what all those different species are? That's where Lasso tool is going to come into play. So if you click on Lasso tool, and you basically draw a box around all that data, a pop-up will then appear, and it will basically identify all of the different species that are being found in the area that you put that box around. And if you scroll down to the bottom of that window, you'll see the option to view the information either in a report or a table. That can be really helpful because, say, for example, you choose the data in a report. Here it's going to tell you all the information about what is there. You can see that there's a total of 701 observations, which basically is including 7 different species. And let's see if I can move this here. And that accounts for 3 different observers. Okay, so giving you a better snapshot of what's there. Now, if you would want to go out and do any kind of management effort there, you know right away which species are being impacted according to, or what's found there according to the data that we have in the database. So kind of a cool tool to use. Keep that in mind if you think that would be relevant for anything that you're doing. Okay, downloading data. So we kind of mentioned a little bit about this at the beginning of the training. This is something that is available to do if you're logged in on the main screen and you scroll down to the very bottom. You'll have the option to download data. So in order to know what data is available to download, you have to first know what your user level is. And for the way that you figure that out, you look in that top right-hand corner of the screen, and it's going to tell you what your user level is set to. And again, your user level is going to be assigned to you based on the amount of training that you have received. So everyone that's part of today's training is going to be at least a user level 7 by the end of today. And that's going to give you access to everything that we've talked about. Your user level is either a 0 or a 1. You're going to be able to download any data. Okay? You're a brand new user. You haven't gotten any training. We don't want to give you that capability just yet. By user level 2 through 4, this is going to allow you to have data, to access data that either you entered or you are the observer for. And this is going to be indicative of a user who has gone through some training to start with. Okay, so you have a basic idea of how to use the database. Level 5 through a 7 is also going to give you access to data that you might be a project leader for. So again, if you're part of something where you're out and you are managing information that's being captured by other people, you will be a project leader. If you are a level 8, this will also allow you to download data for your entire organization. Maybe you are a president of an organization or you're a VP. These would be people that we would give that level 8 access to be able to download data for their entire organization. The level 9 allows you to download data for specific geographies, even more. So that would be given to someone who was a coordinator of like a cooperative weed management area, that they were in charge of a lot of land and they needed to know what was being found in a specific region. Okay, and then level 10 is the administrator level. So there's only 3 of us that have that, and you know who they are. And anything more than that, I think is pretty high up. I'm only a level 10, so anything more than that, I can't tell you. But due to the structure of iMapInvasives, you'll never be able to download all data. I mentioned this at the beginning of the training, and I just want to mention that one more time. And that's because we make sure that we know who's accessing all of the information that we have available, and the only way we can do that is to restrict it. And if you want more information than what you can access, then you have to be in touch with either myself or someone else that's in the program and just request that information be sent to you. Okay. All right, any questions? All right, hope you're doing a good job. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about the analysis of how to really use the information that's being captured in advanced records and the tools that we've been talking about. So really make decisions. Like if you're someone that's involved in management, impacting the decisions that you are making using the data in iMapInvasives. So I'm going to go through a series of examples just to kind of give you a better understanding of what I'm talking about. So maybe you want to know who else is doing work in the area where you are. So say you're a stewardship manager at a local land trust in Allegheny County, and you want to see who is managing invasive species in your region. An example that we could use iMap to figure this out is we could use the Lasso tool to show all the organizations who are conducting treatment efforts in the Pittsburgh region. Okay, so let's do that. The way you would run that type of analysis, you would go to the map and then turn on your county layer and zoom into Allegheny County, and then you're going to go and turn on your treatment layer, and then if needed, and turn on that Lasso tool and group together all the different treatment polygons that show up on the map in the region in Allegheny County that you're interested in. And there, you look at the record details to find out which groups are being active in your area. And so the answer to our question is we can see that there are several organizations that are doing work according to data that's being captured in iMap. That's going to include the Pittsburgh Parks Conservancy, Bartlett Tree Experts, and Steel Sea Grazers. Okay. So again, this is going to give you a better idea of who's doing work in that region, maybe a potential partnership that you would want to consider if you're also working in that region and you're not working with these groups already, but maybe you have something in common as far as an invasive that you like to manage and they are also managing that. So think about it in that regard as far as building partnerships and just getting a better understanding of who's working in your region. Here's another example. So maybe you want to know about data gaps for certain species. So maybe we have information that you know is missing. You want to help to fill that in as far as building our distribution maps. So an example would be that you're a scientist, you live in York County, and aid the efforts of natural resource professionals in your county. know which species may be underreported. Okay, so for this example, we'll say, show me the species currently reported in York County, so I can search for and report on any new species to IMAP. So here's what you would do in order to figure that out. On the Query and Report section from the navigation page, in the geography area, you'd say county and then York County, and then choose to view your query in a report. And from there, you'll be able to figure out all the different species that have already been reported on in York County, and you'll be able to kind of look at that data and say, well, I don't see Japanese knotweed on this list, and I know Japanese knotweed is one of the species that is in my county. So that kind of gives you a better indication of which species we still need information on and which ones you should go out and try to find and report on. Okay, so that's kind of an example of how to figure out about different data gaps. Okay. You can also use the query to do prioritization of survey and treatment efforts. So an example of that kind of work is if you are the leader of a cooperative weed management area and you want to know what efforts are underway or already been completed in the region that you manage. And so this information will help to prioritize your future survey and treatment efforts based on the work that's already been done or is happening now by other people. You could use the Lasso tool to view all the different assessment, survey, treatment, and infestation management records that are documented in your particular cooperative weed management area. And in this example, I'm saying the Erie Cooperative Weed Management Area. In order to figure all that out, you could go to the map on your cooperative weed management layer in that map overlay layer section of the legend, zoom into your region that you're managing, and then turn on all of those different records, the assessment, survey, treatment, and infestation management, and use your Lasso tool to group together all that data and then analyze it as appropriate. Maybe there's some surveys that have been going on that you weren't aware of, and the information that they're capturing is relevant to your work. So this can be really important to find out if other people are doing work or finding species in your region that would be important to future efforts that you're planning to do. You can also do some analysis if you'd like to search for maybe some similar efforts that are happening and you maybe aren't aware of it, but you would want to know and maybe potentially partner with those people. So say a land stewardship manager in county and you want to find out who else in Pennsylvania has done work to control a particular species that you're interested in treating. So some additional questions you might have based on that scenario is what were their treatment methods and were these efforts recent or way a long time ago. So the example that we would potentially use is to say that you would want to use a treatment custom query tool to search for treatments that are done for Japanese knotweed all over Pennsylvania. Maybe that's a specific species that you want to know more about and how people are treating it. So from the main navigation page, you would click on the map and then choose treatments. And from there, you would do a custom data query and look up for specifically Japanese knotweed. Choose that from the target drop-down species list and choose to view that query in a table. And is that information also shown on the map? And you can see two of those efforts. The analysis and results of that query, we're going to show you that there are a total of 9 treatment efforts that have happened across the state that target specific Japanese knotweed. And of those efforts, we can see that they include chemical, mechanical, or manual, and grazing. These the treatment dates range anywhere from 2010 to 2016. So we get that they are, some of them are fairly recent and some of them are from a few years ago. Okay, so this will give you a better understanding of who else is doing work on this species, if maybe want to ask them if they are successful, if they have any advice they could give you based on their experience treating the species might be helpful to benefit the work that you are planning to do. Okay. Any questions about any of those examples? Okay. Great. So I want to go over some early detection and some high priority species that I would encourage you all to be on the lookout for. And if you find them, please report them so that we can know they're being found at. Early detection species, we're define that as being a species that's newly established in Pennsylvania. It could be a species that's thought to Pennsylvania, but it's not well documented. It could be a species that is not yet found here, but is expected to arrive. And these are all these species that are considered to be at least moderately invasive. So here are a few examples of species that we would consider early detection species. So this is called, this picture of is Asian spiderwort, an aggressive plant that will establish itself in freshwater wetlands, and it will crowd out native species by forming dense mats. Also can potentially clog a whole waterway, which is really detrimental, especially like an area that needs flow to benefit the species that are already living there. So this species is not found in Pennsylvania yet, but found in other states that are close to us. So it's known to be in Virginia, Delaware, Maryland, and several other southern states. So if you find this species in Pennsylvania, you want to report it right away because it is not known to be from here right now. Okay, so again, that early detection is so important. This is green crab. This is a species that will threaten populations of other crabs, also clams, mussels, and oysters. It will essentially compete with these native species and prey on them. It also has burrowing activities that can be potentially detrimental. Contributed to the decline of many valuable economic species such as soft-shell crabs on the East Coast and also Dungeness crabs on the West Coast. So known to consume up to 3 half-inch clams per day, and also crabs that it's the same size as those. So it will eat a lot of native species. That's a big problem. This species also is not necessarily found in Pennsylvania, but it is found throughout the coast of the Mid-Atlantic region from North Carolina and northward. This is one that if you find this one, please report it as soon as possible. Japanese silvergrass is another species that we would consider early detection. This will invade disturbed areas that are sunny or semi-shaded. So you'll find it in places like roadsides, woodland borders, and also just general clearings. And even though it's not really considered a severe threat right now, it does form monocultures, and it should be monitored excuse me, and eliminated if it's found in the open landscape. This one that you'll notice is frequently planted in yards and gardens because it's considered an ornamental species. So again, I mentioned earlier, whenever you're out buying species, your local nursery or your local Lowe's or Home Depot, make sure you do your homework ahead of time and make sure you're not buying an invasive species. Always think about trying to purchase a native species instead. That's always the better alternative. For this species, where is it now? Again, not found in Pennsylvania, but it is known to be naturalized in Quebec and Ontario, and also in Minnesota, Nebraska, Missouri, Illinois, and New York. So it has not really invaded the natural parts of our state yet, but considering it's in New York, it very well could come our way very soon. So keep your eyes peeled for this one as well. So those are the early detection species. So I want to mention a few species we would consider as a high priority. So the difference between the early detection and the high priority is high priority ones are going to be species that are already found in Pennsylvania, but are not widespread throughout the state. They're going to be found in less than a third of our counties. So they're here, but they're not everywhere. And again, these would be species considered to be at least moderately invasive. So this is a northern snakehead. This is a fish that has no natural enemies in this area because, of course, it wasn't from here originally, and so it hasn't adapted itself to our environment. And it can have devastating impacts to our native fish and our wildlife because it is so aggressive. So it's known to compete with native fish. It will alter feeding habits, food availability, and behaviors of other members of the ecosystem where it's being found in. So essentially, it just changes everything, and not a good thing. It also is known to survive out of water in moist locations and can move over land to new bodies of water. So it can actually move around on its own, which is super scary. It can do it. So this is one of the other reasons why this species is one to be on the lookout for, because it could definitely invade new areas all on its own without the help of people. So where is it now? Snakehead has been found in parts of Pennsylvania, primarily in the southeast. So find it in other parts of the southeast. Please continue to report on those findings, and especially if you find it in other places of the state, we really want to know about it because we are not aware of it being in any other parts other than the southeast. Okay. This is a plant. It's called black jetbead. It's known to invade forested areas, and it will create a shrub layer which will essentially displace any native shrubs that might already be there. It's known to shade out understory species, and it will restrict any tree seedlings that are trying to establish themselves because it is providing so much shade. The sun is really what the seedlings need, and it's not allowing the seedlings to get that needed sunlight. So despite its invasive qualities, it is available for sale. Again, one to be on the lookout for, that you don't want to purchase this one. Make sure you know ahead of time. Do your homework, know what you're looking for. Always consider there's new alternatives instead. So where is it now? So though it's found in various parts of Pennsylvania, its overall population density is still considered to be rare in the state. So again, if you find this one, know that you're reporting on it. This is goat's rue. Goat's rue is listed as both a state and a federal noxious weed. And the reason why it's considered noxious is because feeding trials have proven that if goats or sheep or cattle eat this species, it will kill them. So it's definitely a big deal for a lot of people involved in the agricultural industry. But again, just not a species to have around. It may be confused with a similar species known as crown vetch, which also is another invasive. So they are similar in appearance, but they are different. This is one that, for management purposes, you've been managing this one for a very long time if you have it, unfortunately. And the reason for that is that its seeds can remain viable for up to 26 years. So any eradication approach, you don't want to keep a focus on the seed bank because it's just going to keep coming back, unfortunately. And the reason probably why it's considered noxious. So in Pennsylvania, we do have this species here, but it is rare. It's known to be from Bedford, Warren, McKean, Cameron, and Montgomery counties. Okay, and this is one that you definitely want to report on if you find it. So a quick little blurb I want to put in about early detection high priority species. We did just create a new brochure here within our Heritage Department. It's Be an Early Detector, and it's highlighting 12 species that are considered emerging with Pennsylvania and are falling either under the early detection or the high priority status. So this is something that we definitely want to get the word out about and distribute this brochure to as many people as possible, because we want people to know that these are species that we want to keep a lookout for, and if you find them, to report what you're finding to iMapInvasives. So this is available to download and print, and you can find it on our website, and there's a link there to find that if you're interested. Okay, so I want to just, before we wrap up the training today, I want to talk a little bit about some things that are on our website that might be of interest to you and that are really good resources to have as far as better understanding important invasive species. So we have our Be on the Lookout page, and that's actually where that Emerging Invasive Species brochure is located that I just mentioned. So species on this page are ones that are not yet in Pennsylvania but could arrive at any time. We just keep our eyes peeled for them. And it's really important that if we find one or you think you find one, report it either way, because if it happens to be one of these species, it's really important to make sure that information gets documented. Okay. So how to access this information? So for our website from iMapInvasives.org, click Resources, and there's a section called Be on the Lookout. We also have a section where you can see all the different species that are tracked. Right now we're tracking 357 species in the state. Again, this is comprising species that are both here now and early detection species that we don't have yet, but we could at any time, and we want to be able to allow you to report on them if you find them. We have information on this page is broken down by all species, so you can look at all the different species together in the same list, or also just look at the different categories of species, and they're listed here. And so if you'd like to look more at that, if your website and the Resources tab, there's a section just called Track Species. We have a section that's really neat to check out called Gallery of Invaders, and this is where you can learn more about specific invasive species that are in Pennsylvania by reviewing the species profiles that we have. They're actually from a field guide that put out by Pennsylvania Sea Grant a few years ago, which was very well done, and kind of adopted the information that's had in there and incorporated that into our website. So there's lots of different categories of species that you can check out on there. There's really nice pictures and a lot of really good information. So from our website under Resources, look for Gallery of Invaders. We also put out a quarterly newsletter as far as what's happening with iMapInvasives here in Pennsylvania, because stuff literally happening all the time. Reports coming in for high priority species, management efforts are happening across the state. New organizations are starting to use the database, and we talk about the specific work that they're doing. So there is a lot happening, and it might be interesting to keep update on all of that by looking at what we're featuring in our newsletter. So some recent stories I actually just put in the fall newsletter talk about the Pittsburgh Parks Conservancy and how they're using that to manage invasive species that are found in city parks. We talk about a high priority finding that was just made recently for common frogbit in Lake Wilhelm, which is in Mercer County. That was found by a DCNR park ranger. So that was exciting to hear about that species that is still rare in the state, and it is being found and it is being managed. That's really great news. We also feature certain invasive species and give kind of a description and photos of them so you become more familiar. So the newsletter, we highlighted a species called hardy kiwi vine. And so we have a section where we highlight encouraging words from some of our users. Or you can also refer to that as a testimonial, why people think iMapInvasives is a good tool to be using. So if you want to read more about the newsletters, we have archives of all the ones we've put out so far. You can check them out anytime. There are Resources tab, and actually it's not track species, it's newsletters. And if you have a story to share that you would want to be featured in the newsletter, please send it. We're always looking for new stories to feature for what's happening with you guys all over Pennsylvania. So it's exciting to hear your stories. Also, we have some nice reference guides and just some frequently asked questions that you can review if you want to go back and learn more about how to use some of the tools that we talked about today. So our frequently asked questions, just kind of a way to learn more about the ins and outs of the iMapInvasives database. And as far as reference guides. If you need assistance or a refresher on how to create any of the data types or the advanced tools that we talked about today, that's all covered under the reference guide section. And how to access that on our website under resources, you'll look for either reference guides and also FAQs. Okay, so this is where I like to open it up. We do have about 20 minutes left, so we have some time. And I'd like to ask you guys some questions. So if you're willing to share, great. How are you using iMapInvasives in the work that you do, and what have you learned today that will be relevant in use of iMapInvasives in the future? So either one of those questions, does anyone have any responses?
I do.
Sure, go ahead.
My name's Eli. So for the first one, I'm an intern at the Pittsburgh Sparks Conservancy. The article that's actually written is written by my supervisor. So we do monitoring like a bunch of different sites throughout Pittsburgh. View Park, Henley, Frick, and even Highland. Those are like the main parks to go into. And we do constant sweeps looking for invasives, and I've been monitoring them, and I have not putting them on iMapInvasives because it's been I started to get into it, but I will be doing that in the future, and it should help monitor the situation much better.
Awesome, thank you for that.
I've got the same story here. We've identified several or a couple invasive species here at Glade Run Lake. We need to get into the system. I'll be interested to see if anybody else has been working anywhere in the area on these kind of problems. And so this will be really handy to not only log what we have to be able to capture the data permanently, but also partner with other potential groups in the area.
Great, thank you, Dave. Appreciate that feedback.
Hi, this is Jason. I work for the Delaware Highlands Conservancy out here in eastern Pennsylvania. Basically, we're probably going to use this in our monitoring efforts. We hold conservation easements for private landowners, and so we'll be able to see if there are any encroaching threats that we can kind of, get a heads up on and help warn our landowners, about some potential threats that might be coming their way, and help them manage their lands to keep these invasives off of them.
Wonderful. Do you else have any feedback? This is really great to hear. Okay. Well, if you have any other feedback or any questions, we'll wrap things up for today, but always feel free to reach out to me. Here's my contact information. And always, I love to hear from you guys. I mean, this is really a database that is for you and work that you're doing, which is great work, and keep it up. It's not easy work, and it's not often recognized, but we do appreciate it. And certainly this is a tool that we encourage you to utilize to your benefit. And yeah, so keep the good work up, and let me know if you guys have any questions as you go on. So thank you.
This is Dave.
Yeah, go ahead.
You've had another student these last two trainings in Nancy Fowler.
Oh, okay, cool.
So you can log her into your student list.
I'll do that. Okay, well, if there isn't any other questions, we will wrap up, and thank you all for attending today, and stay in touch.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.